This rocket engine is not very powerful. It's not especially big or pretty, and if I'm being honest, it's not even the main reason why I'm showing you this clip. That would be the fact that if you examine the background of this video, you can't see a single human soul for miles, and that shows you exactly how scary this type of rocket is. This is Robert Goddard, and nowadays he's known as the father of modern rocketry. But at one point, he was known as Crazy Bob because he kept a suitcase of TNT in his attic that he was trying to use to compress graphite with explosions to turn into a diamond. Now, I'm not too sure that story is 100% truth, but just the fact that the story exists makes it fair to say that rocket scientists don't normally get scared easily. Most of them are not even clinically sane. Which makes sense. It's a trait of the job because normally, when things go bad with rockets, they explode. They're basically bombs with well-designed holes. So, when I tell you that most rocket scientists don't want to stand anywhere near that rocket engine, it begs the question, what is it about that rocket engine that is so scary? I can summarize the reason with one word: hypergolic. In the late 17th century, a gentleman by the name of Frederick Slayer mixed nitric acid with turpentine and realized the mixture spontaneously combusts with no ignition. That is how he accidentally discovered hypergolic reactions. The word hypergolic comes from the amalgamation of two Greek words and one Latin word. Hyper, that means excessive, over the top, and ergon, that means energy, plus oilium, that means oil. The end result is oil that burns excessively well, and it burns well because you don't even need to ignite it. Normally, if you want to burn something, you need a means of ignition, a flame, a spark, something that gives you that initial spike of heat to start the chain reaction that we call combustion. In rockets, ignition can be tricky, especially when you're injecting freezing cold propellants at insane speeds into a closed chamber. So it's easy to understand the appeal of propellants that don't require ignition. Propellant is a compact word to describe what is used to propel the rocket. In most cases, one of the propellants is a fuel. That can be kerosene, alcohol, gasoline, sugar, toilet paper, literally anything that burns and generates hot gases that you can expel out of a nozzle. To burn those fuels, you need an oxidizer, normally something with oxygen in it, and it can be something as simple as air. Air has oxygen, and that is what jet engines use. But rockets are meant to go to space, and there's no abundance of air in space. So what you need to do is pack air inside of the rocket. The only problem is that air is a gas. It's not very dense and it takes too much space. You can compress it, but even that is not enough to solve the problem. What you need to do is to literally condense it, make it into a liquid. And to do that, you need to cool air to absurdly low temperatures. You can see how this becomes complicated. Sure, make air into a liquid, but now you have this freezing liquid that really doesn't want to be a liquid and will boil off at any chance you give it. Keep in mind that the first use for rockets were missiles, and during the war, you can't really afford to sit around waiting while your propellants boil off. So in the 1940s, scientists had an idea. What if instead of using pure oxygen, we use another compound that has oxygen in it, but it's already a liquid? For example, nitric acid. Nitric acid has 3 very useful oxygen atoms, and it works pretty well as an oxidizer. The only problem is the obvious one. We're talking about nitric acid, and nitric acid corrodes almost every single part on the rocket. It's fine with missiles since the end result destroys the rocket anyway, but for space applications, it's not great. I said hypergolic reactions were discovered by accident, but the hypergolic propellants weren't. Nitric acid and turpentine are not a great choice for propellants, so to find the perfect couple, scientists brute force through thousands of experiments. Many pairs of compounds were tested: nitric acid with furfuryl alcohol, nitric acid with aniline, they tried acetylenes, nitriles, and even gasoline. Sometimes they would even create blends or try additives to make non-hypergolic fuels hypergolic. It's important to say that just because you mix something and it burns or explodes, it doesn't make it hypergolic. For example, if you throw sodium metal on water, you get a pretty intense bang, but that comes from the sodium generating a lot of heat that ignites the hydrogen on the water. In this case, there's still an ignition, which is the heat generated by the reaction itself. For it to be hypergolic, it needs to combust on contact. What makes this new branch of rocket science so tricky is the fact that many pairs of propellants ignite on contact, but not immediately.
Sponsor time.
My shop is my sanctuary. I like to keep it with a certain decor, embellish it with certain accoutrements, if you will. In my case, I love rockets, I like anime, and I hate tomatoes. These are high-quality metal posters because metal is metal. You can destroy a paper poster with a glass of water, but these, I could metalwork these into an actual rocket. These metal posters are made by a company called Displate, and they were kind enough to sponsor this video. Some of these designs I got directly from their catalog. They have over 200 licensed collections from iconic brands, like Star Wars, Marvel, Warhammer, and Lord of the Rings. This plate is a great gift idea for any occasions. I'm personally a big fan of Demon Slayer, and that's the reason why I got this beautiful piece of art. You can also customize your posters with your original designs and pictures. This one, for example, is a schematic for the V2 rocket, the one and only OG rocket. The poster comes with a magnetic mount, so you don't need tools and you can install them in less than a minute. You can even swap them if you want to mix things up. So, if you need to press some identity into your own space, give their catalog a look. The posters are pretty cool. Right now you can get a Displate Metal poster with a 26% off discount, 2 with 31% off, and 3 with 36%. Click the link display.com/intexa in the description down below, and use your discount code INTEXA to get the promotion. A special thanks to Displate for sponsoring this video. The posters are pretty cool, and a big thanks to you for supporting this channel. Now, let's get on with it. At one point, scientists were trying to measure the ignition delay with a transparent combustion chamber, when all of a sudden, they saw an intense flash, a splitting crack, and the lid of the chamber was shot through the ceiling. Oh yeah, they were testing this indoors. This was the 40s after all. The 40-pound slab of high-grade glass turned instantly into fine powder, and by some miracle, everyone survived. All these dangerous tests landed in these two chemicals, hydrazine as the fuel and nitrogen tetroxide as the oxidizer. Hydrazine is a transparent liquid that looks like water and has a pungent smell, many times described as fishy. Nitrogen tetroxide is a red translucid liquid, but it dissociates into nitrogen dioxide, which is a brownish red fume. These two chemicals combined have a pretty good performance and energy density, but they really shine in terms of volumetric energy density, meaning that if you only had one bottle of soda to pack your propellants, these two would probably be your best choice. Plus, they are easy to store, liquid at room temperature, and they ignite when mixed. So, if all of that is true, why is it that nowadays most rocket engines use liquid oxygen with fuels like methane or kerosene instead of using these miracle propellants? Well, in this world, nothing comes for free, and in this case, the price is your life. Hydrazine looks like water. That is its first lie. When I said it smells fishy, I meant it literally, but you can also take it in a metaphorical sense, because if you so much stand next to an open beaker of hydrazine, by the time you smell the sardines, the vapors are already entering your respiratory tract. A warm, wet, protein-lined surface. Hydrazine reacts with all three. At first, you feel a light burning sensation in your nose, throat, and lungs. The irritation will make you cough, and as you start coughing, it already reached your bloodstream. Congratulations, you probably have cancer. But don't worry, or at least you have no time to worry, because your brain is getting attacked, your liver destroyed, your cells can't breathe because your mitochondria are getting killed, and your bloodstream is filling up with lactic acid. At the same time, you feel dizzy, nauseous, and shake uncontrollably as you slip into a coma. And that is from inhalation alone. With direct contact, the list is just too long. If hydrazine is a discreet water-looking chameleon, nitrogen tetroxide is a poisonous frog warning you not to get close. But if you insist, as the red fumes reach way deep into your lungs, right down to the tiny air sacs, the nitrous dioxide reacts with the moisture in your lungs to make nitric acid. Not metaphorically, literal and very pure nitric acid. The same one that destroyed metal parts in rockets. Your lungs start to panic and release fluid in hopes you're just giving cigarettes a chance and you can cough it out, but in reality, is making more moisture and in turn more nitric acid. You feel like you're burning inside, but at the same time drowning in your own fluid. Each breath feels thinner than the last, like you're trying to breathe through a soaked sponge, until you can't breathe at all. Okay, I dramatized this a bit. You probably won't get all of that from sniffing them once, and it won't all happen at the same time, but it is convenient for me to put it like that because, believe it or not, the thing that makes these chemicals so toxic and corrosive is exactly the same thing that makes them so great as propellants: their instability. The hydrazine molecule is held together by a single bond between the nitrogen atoms, which is very weak. To make it worse, it has too many electrons, and it's dying to give them off. It's like a mousetrap where the cheese is the electrons, and in this janky metaphor, the mouse is the nitrogen tetroxide, because it's hungry for electrons, and also because the N2O4 molecule is really just two molecules of NO2 tied together with a strand of air. That's the reason why they don't need ignition. It's because they are unstable soulmates. They barely need to get close to each other to release their burning passion. Hydrazine itself can sometimes be found outside classical rocketry as a gas generator. It's used in the F-16 fighter jets as an emergency electricity generator. It was also used in a short-lived rocket plane in the Second World War that killed more of its own pilots than enemies. And it was used in drag racing as a fuel, because despite all its faults in the health department, Hydrazine is a tremendous fuel, especially because it will burn even when the mixture is extremely fuel-rich. The rocket engine that I showed you at the beginning uses monomethyl hydrazine as the fuel and a mixture of nitrogen tetroxide with nitrogen oxide. That mixture is commonly called Mon3 because in this case it has 3% of nitrogen oxide. These are basically the same propellants as before, they just have some additives to lower the freezing temperature. They are still hypergolic and still very toxic. Do you know what's funny about these two propellants? And not much is funny about them? The result of the combustion of these two toxic, corrosive, and carcinogenic propellants is a fairly clean flame made of nitrogen gas and steam. It doesn't even have carbon emissions. Even so, nowadays this type of rocket engine is mostly used in outer space for smaller thrusters, where it can only give cancer to aliens and lunar monsters. This specific engine was 3D printed in a nickel alloy. They didn't tell me which one exactly, but I'm guessing is the fabled super alloy called Inconel that can take heat like a champ. The expansion cone for the rocket uses an even more heat-resistant niobium alloy that only melts at a staggering temperature of 2500 degrees Celsius. You don't see it in this clip because it only makes sense to use it in the vacuum of space, where it raises the total thrust of the rocket to 6000 newtons. By the way, the company that tested this rocket has an entire building filled with vacuum pumps just so they can simulate space conditions to test the rocket engines. They are literally vacuuming rocket exhaust. Take that, Dyson. Now, if you were paying attention, earlier I said that to burn a fuel, normally you need something with oxygen in it. And the reason why I said it like that is because oxygen is not the only element capable of oxidizing a fuel. As a matter of fact, it's not even the best by a big margin. That title belongs to fluorine. And if you put it in the form of chlorine trifluoride, you get a substance that is so unstable that is hypergolic with almost everything, not just fuels, everything. There's an account by a famous rocket chemist named John D. Clark where chlorine trifluoride was spilled in the lab, and it immediately went hypergolic with the floor. It ate through the concrete, the gravel, and it kept going. With this hypergolic oxidizer, you can even use glass as a fuel. Think about what I just said. It burns glass. Glass is not supposed to burn. Other items on the list of things this demon propellant can burn include water, you heard that right, and my personal favorite, asbestos, which used to be used to protect stuff from fire until we realized it also gives us cancer. If instead of building an asbestos rocket you go for the best fuel available to humans, liquid hydrogen, you would achieve the highest level of performance ever tested on a rocket engine. Just the fact that scientists considered chlorine trifluoride as a propellant comes to show how hard it is to design a normal rocket engine. That and engineers prefer simple danger to complex safety. Talking about safety, chlorine trifluoride puts all the other hypergols on a corner in terms of danger. It wouldn't make you cough, it wouldn't give you cancer. It would melt your flesh and set your bones on fire. The amount of time it takes for the combustion to start with chlorine trifluoride is so short that scientists couldn't measure it. It is so dangerous that the only reason it is possible to store it, it's because when it reacts with certain materials, it generates a very stable compound that protects the container. There's this story, which is almost a myth at this point and probably not true, about a propellant lab in Russia that was located next to a farm. One of the containers with chlorine trifluoride was leaking, and that tiny leak somehow reached a goat that spontaneously combusted. That is what we call, in rocket terms, an hypergolic barbecue. If you take a step back and look at the big picture here, the message is loud and clear. If you want a lot of energy condensed in a small amount of mass and stored in a small amount of space, there is no running away from it. In one way or another, there's a price to pay. It's just the way our universe works. And as always, remember, tomatoes are disgusting.